Let's talk about the Washington Commanders because I believe that this franchise has a bright future with Jayden Daniels at the helm. Now, I said this 3 weeks ago that Jayden Daniels was the best fit for the Washington Commanders with Caleb Williams being taken with the first overall pick. And that is what the Washington Commanders did. They went out and they selected Jayden Daniels. To me, he was the second best quarterback in this draft class. Some people say that he was the best quarterback in college this season because he won the Heisman Trophy. He's coming off one of the best seasons for a quarterback in college history. And a lot of people are comparing him to RG3. He's a better version of RG3 when RG3 was coming out of college with Baylor, especially as a passer. The thing was with RG3 when he was with the Washington Redskins at the time, he didn't want to go out there and run anymore. He wanted to go back there. He wanted to pass the football. He wanted to be inside the pocket. He wanted a more traditional offense like a Peyton Manning, like a Eli Manning, and some of the offense that you see today that are predicated to a Sean Payton's offense. He was not ready for that, and he did not want to slide as well. It was a lot of problems that went on with the Washington Redskins at that time, and the offensive line was not the greatest. You worry about the same things with Jayden Daniels, but he's such a polished passer at this level already, and he can play right now, and I expect for him to play right now. A humble kid, but the Washington Commanders offensive line was one of the worst offensive lines last season. I would make the case that it was the worst offensive line last season, with the Tennessee Titans being put in there as well. Sam Howell, who was a starting quarterback last season, was the most sacked quarterback, most pressure quarterback, and he did not have any time in the pocket. Now, Jayden Daniels, he's going to have to use those legs to buy himself some time and to move in space. And I do believe that Jayden Daniels will be very successful with the Washington Commanders long term. Early on, it may be a bit of a struggle. It just depends on Cliff Kingsbury. Part of the reason why the offensive line looked as bad as it did last season was because of the play calls by Eric Bieniemy. He was a terrible offensive coordinator. And so many people in the past are banging the table. They're saying, hey, he should be a head coach somewhere. He deserves to have a head coaching position. No, he didn't. He got exposed when he became the offensive coordinator with the Washington Commanders, to the point to where he's not even no longer in the NFL calling plays. He's not even on the coaching staff anymore. The offensive line was terrible from a talent standpoint, yes. But to just call deep shots down the field over and over again with a young quarterback in Sam Howell and with a weak offensive line, that was bound to happen. I think Cliff Kingsbury is a better offensive coordinator than Eric Bieniemy, but at the same time, how good of an offensive coordinator will Cliff Kingsbury be with the Washington Commanders? I had a lot of criticism with Cliff when he was the head coach of the Arizona Cardinals. Now, being a head coach is different from just being an offensive coordinator. When you're a head coach, you have to worry about everything: special teams, defense, offensive personnel. You have to worry about everything as a whole. When you're an offensive coordinator, all you have to worry about is game planning. You have to worry about your guys that you want in and out of the game. So hopefully he'll be a very good offensive coach, because Jayden Daniels is going to need all the help that he can get with this offensive line being as bad as it was last season. And they brought in some better offensive linemen. They brought in Tyler, the center from the Dallas Cowboys. Very good center. He can hold his own. He's going to give Jayden Daniels a lot of support up front. And I'll also say this as well. When you have a special quarterback like Jayden Daniels, he has a special skill set because he can run around. Look at what the Ravens did with Lamar Jackson. And I'm not calling Jayden Daniels the next Lamar Jackson, because I believe he will be the first ever Jayden Daniels. You have to build that team around him. They predicated towards the run and then the pass with Lamar Jackson. They have to do the same thing with the Washington Commanders. Get the right guys around him. The wide receivers are fine. I'll talk about the wide receivers in just a couple of minutes. But get that offensive line right. Get the tight end room right. Try to run the football as much as possible and help out Jayden Daniels, because at the end of the day, he is a rookie that is going to a team that had bad offensive personnel and bad play throughout the entire season last season. It wasn't just on Sam Howell. It wasn't just on Eric Bieniemy. Those players also did let down the ownership of the Washington Commanders. Now, this is what I also want to talk about. They have Terry McLaurin. Very good wide receiver, over 1,000 yards receiving every single season in his career, similar to Mike Evans in that aspect. They have both had over 1,000 yards receiving every single season in their career. Terry McLaurin is a true number one wide receiver. They also have Jahan Dotson. Jahan Dotson has dealt with injuries, but he has struggled to separate when he has been on the field. Solid wide receiver. He's a solid number two option. 49 receptions, 518 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns. He has to be more consistent with the Commanders moving forward, and he has to stay healthy, because right now he has not lived up to that hype of being a first-round pick. And like I mentioned, not a bad wide receiver, nice skill set. But I think he can have a breakout year this year with Jayden Daniels at the helm. And terrible quarterback play has hurt him as well, to be real with you guys on the field. And I'm not talking about Sam Howell. I'm talking about guys like Taylor Heineke that cannot get him the football consistently, and quarterbacks before as well. Even though Sam Howell did lead the league in interceptions, like I mentioned before, just a terrible offensive line and terrible coaching. You also selected Luke McCaffrey, who is the brother of Christian McCaffrey, the running back of the San Francisco 49ers. I like this pickup. He's a wide receiver from Rice. He was their number one wide receiver. He's not going to go deep down the field and burn cornerbacks, but he is a solid receiver. Has great hands, and he's tough. You can send him over the middle of the field and send him up those seam routes. And speaking of the middle of the field, Jayden Daniels did not work the middle of the field as much. And you may say, okay, why? Why didn't he do that? Because he had two number one wide receivers and Malik Neighbors. And he also had another great wide receiver in Brian Thomas Jr. He helped elevate those guys to the next level. And the system was predicated to just outside throwing. He's going to have to elevate his game when it comes to throwing across the middle of the field. And he showed that he is capable of doing that, because Terry McLaurin can win on the outside. Luke McCaffrey is a slot and an outside wide receiver. If you put Luke McCaffrey inside the slot and you let him work, this could be a steal for the Washington Commanders moving forward. And you had to get another wide receiver in that room when Curtis Samuel departed and he went to the Buffalo Bills. So I like the two players that they got on the offensive end in Jayden Daniels and Luke McCaffrey. But they also did some other things as well in the NFL draft, and I'm pretty proud of. In the second round, they selected Mike, cornerback from Michigan. He fits the Dan Quinn system. Dan Quinn, phenomenal defensive coordinator for the Dallas Cowboys. Phenomenal defensive coordinator with the Seattle Seahawks. As a head coach, he did make a Super Bowl appearance with the Atlanta Falcons. He predicates his defense on two things: getting pressure on the quarterback and pressing up the wide receivers. You selected a cornerback in the first round, and last year's draft class, Emmanuel Forbes. I feel so bad for this kid because he had a horrible rookie season, a terrible rookie season. Some people are calling this kid a bust. I won't go that far. I will let him play out his contract. I think that he is better suited for the Dan Quinn's defense than he was for Jack Del Rio's defense. Then Jack Del Rio got fired and Ron Rivera started calling defensive plays, and it did not work out for that kid. Then they benched him. He has the ability to go out there and be a true number one corner with the Commanders. Hopefully they give him that opportunity. He has the speed and the length. He just looked confused on the field, and they left that kid on the island with no safety help. I go back to that Chicago Bears game when he was one-on-one with DJ Moore. DJ Moore had 3 touchdowns in that game. And not once did Jack Del Rio go out there and try to pivot and help that kid out. So yes, he did play terribly, but coaching did not help him out either. I'm telling you, last season was just terrible with the Commanders, with the coaching and the players as well. Hopefully this coaching staff can be better than what the coaching staff was last season. But having Mike alongside Emmanuel Forbes, that could be a very good 1-2 punch with the Commanders in that secondary. And you also have a front seven that can go out there and get the quarterback. They traded Chase Young to the San Francisco 49ers for a 3rd round pick. They traded Montez Sweat for a 2nd round pick to the Chicago Bears. So they lost their top 2 edge rushers. But you have 2 very good interior defensive linemen, and Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen. But they also drafted a guy in the 2nd round who I love, and Johnny Newton. Phenomenal defensive tackle that can go back there. He can sack the quarterback, and he can stop the run as well. This is going to be a very good, athletic, versatile front when you talk about those interior defensive linemen. Instead of now just having 2, you now have 3. He had 7.5 sacks in his last season with Illinois. I think that you hit on this pick here, and he could play across the defensive line. The same with Jonathan Allen and Deron Payne. And you're bringing over Dante Fowler, who had a very solid season with the Dallas Cowboys. 4 sacks on the season, 1 forced fumble. And you're bringing over Dorrance Armstrong as well, who had a very impressive season, 7.5 sacks from the Dallas Cowboys. So not only are you putting better defensive linemen around your top 2 core interior defensive linemen, you're going out there and you're taking away from your division rival in the Dallas Cowboys, which was going to happen because Dan Quinn was just their defensive coordinator, and these players, they love Dan Quinn. They're going to play hard for him. So I expect for the defense to be better. You also went out there and signed Bobby Wagner in free agency. He's not the same Bobby Wagner that he was 5 to 6 years ago with the Seattle Seahawks, but he can still play. Bobby Wagner is going to go out there and be that veteran that they really need at that middle linebacking spot. He is 33 years old, but he had 96 solo tackles, 3.5 sacks. He's not going to go out there and make plays on the football anymore like how he used to, because his quickness has gone away just a little bit, but he can still get to the running back and make tackles in space, and that's all you can ask for. But bringing in a guy like Frankie Louvu, who had 5.5 sacks on the season, 2 forced fumbles, and 66 solo tackles with the Carolina Panthers, he was an ultimate playmaker. And the Carolina Panthers, they wanted to keep him. But instead, he said, you know what? I want to go play with Dan Quinn. I want a brand new chapter in my life. Very good linebackers going to fit the system of the Washington Commanders. This is the one thing I will say about Dan Quinn. This is my one knock on him. His rushing defense hasn't been the best throughout his entire career, but he's never had defensive linemen like this on the interior. When I'm telling you that Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen, that they're special, you could basically just run a basic front, and those guys will get back there and make life hard on the center and the guard. A lot of the reason to why Montez Sweat had the success that he had, and Chase Young, and taking nothing away from those guys, was because of the interior pressure that both of those guys can bring. And if one of them do go down, you could bring in Johnny Newton as well. Or you could use one of those guys as trade bait if Johnny Newton can go out there and really just impress in his rookie season. So it's a win-win situation by selecting Johnny Newton in the second round. I know a lot of people say go offensive line here. They went with an offensive lineman later on in the draft that I will touch on in just a couple of minutes. But I like what the defense looks like right now. It looks better on paper than it did last season. And paper doesn't always win. But Dan Quinn has always been a better defensive game planner than Ron Rivera. And you can just go back and look at the numbers. Like I mentioned before, very good with the Seattle Seahawks. Very good defensive game planner with the Atlanta Falcons. And you saw what the Dallas Cowboys defense looked like this season being coached underneath Dan Quinn. And they also have Jeremy Chin at that safety position as well, who is a versatile player in the secondary. His snaps got cut the last 2 years, but for the first 2 years of his career, he was a star safety for the Carolina Panthers. So that defense can go out there and really just help them out while Jayden Daniels is figuring out the NFL, because it is going to be a learning curve for that kid. Opposing teams are going to try to keep him in the pocket. They're going to try to make him really go out there and beat him with his arm. I believe that he can, but the offensive staff around him is what I'm worried about, especially the structure within that offensive line. And speaking of the offensive line, they went out there and they selected an offensive lineman in the third round. Brandon Coleman, guard from TCU. He can play guard. He can play center. He can move all around for you. He's a very good, versatile offensive lineman that this team needs. You have Tyler at that center position, but no one else in this offensive line played particularly good last season. Sam Cosmi didn't play his best. Andrew Wiley allowed 9 sacks in the season, even though for the sacks that he did allow, they were rated as Sam Howell holding on to the football for too long. At the end of the day, Sam Howell could only do what was being called for him, and guys were not getting open because the wide receivers were in the bottom of the league in terms of separation. So there's only so much he can do. The offensive line could play better if they get rid of the football quicker. Hopefully, Cliff Kingsbury orchestrates that in this offense with Jayden Daniels. And Jayden Daniels has a quick release as well. And you have some solid running backs with Jayden Daniels. They went out there, they signed Austin Eckler to a sweetheart deal. I think that Austin Eckler is a very good utility back in terms of catching the football at the backfield. He can run in between the tackles here and there, but he's not going to average 5 to 6 yards a carry. He's not going to average even 4 yards a carry. He averaged 3.5 yards a carry this season with the Los Angeles Chargers, 5 rushing touchdowns, 628 rushing yards. Very good receiving back. He just can't run in between the tackles. He is better suited when he can play off someone. Lucky enough, they have that running back in the room with him, and Brian Robinson Jr., who is a very good running back with the Washington Commanders. His numbers don't look the greatest, but he has 733 rushing yards on the season, 5 rushing touchdowns, and he averaged 4 yards a carry. Having over 700 rushing yards in an Eric Bieniemy offense is basically like having over 1,200 rushing yards because they rarely ever ran the football. The last time they ran the football effectively enough was in week 2. Then they went completely away from that. They only ran the football 10 to 15 times in a game. You look at what they did before Eric Bieniemy got here. They ran the football a lot with Antonio Gibson and Brian Robinson Jr. And I understand why Antonio Gibson is no longer with the Commanders. He fumbled the football too much. But Brian Robinson Jr. is a very good physical running back. He slept on. Give him the football more. He can have the football 20, 25 times in a game, and the speed's not going to go anywhere. But imagine giving him the football 10 to 15 times in a game, and you let Austin Eckler come in and take some of that pressure off of him. You can get more usage out of him as the game progresses. progresses. At the tight end spot, they did sign Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz has dealt with injuries in the past. I don't believe that he's going to give you a full season. I could be wrong. 27 receptions for 187 receiving yards, 1 receiving touchdown. That's what he did last season. That's not good at all. That's why they drafted a tight end in Ben. I believe that Ben from Kansas State is going to come over and be that receiving tight end that they're looking for. Now, his last season in college was pretty solid. He came out, he had 676 receiving yards, 6 receiving touchdowns. He averaged 13 yards a catch. I think that he's going to be very good with Jayden Daniels, but he is young. I would say give Jayden Daniels a lot of time. Let the Commanders truly build around this kid. And if the Commanders can do that, build around the rushing offense, cater to his strengths. Don't go out there and try to make him a quarterback that he's not, like how they did with RG3. And that was a different ownership. That was a different brass den. That was Dan Snyder. Now you have Josh Harris, who right now is trying to turn the corner. The Washington Commanders fan base has shown up and shown out. They're showing up to training camp again. They're showing up to try to show support for the team. They stopped doing that in the later years of Dan Snyder because he just didn't care about the team anymore. Hopefully you could take care of this kid, start with the offensive line, and if the wide receivers are not better, try to go get some more wide receivers during the season to see what you really have in Jayden Daniels. But take your time with him and be very careful with how you use him in open field. He's a guy that's known to take some big hits here and there, and he's not the biggest quarterback. He's on the slimmer side. He's a skinnier type of quarterback, and you worry about those hard hits that he could take at this level. But at the same time, if Bryce Young can stay healthy in his rookie season, there's really no reason to why Jayden Daniels cannot. And like I mentioned, he can go out there and make jukes in space. He will slide out of bounds and he'll just slide down. He's a smart quarterback and his football IQ is top notch. But let me know in the comment section below, how do you guys feel about the Washington Commanders drafting Jayden Daniels in the first round? And is he a true franchise quarterback in the future with the Washington Commanders? If you're new to the channel, hit the subscribe button. If you like the video, hit the like button. Most importantly, want each and every last one, guys, stay safe, stay positive. Thanks for watching the video, guys. God bless. Peace.